First of all, let me welcome you to Product Coffee. I'm Jason Brett, if we haven't met before. I host Product Coffee every Wednesday at either 7:30 a.m. Eastern or 11:30 a.m. Eastern, depending on the week. We have this live Zoom call where we talk about product management topics designed to help us deliver more impactful results to both our companies and to our customers. And today we've got a really great program. Before we get into it, I do want to give a moment of thanks to our key sponsors, Method, Pragmatic Institute, and Feature Upvote. We've got our friend John Mansour back, and John has been a part of Product Coffee. He was one of our very first guests. He's been supporting Product Camp Atlanta since the very beginning of Product Camp Atlanta, and we were talking about bringing him back onto the program and what topics we might cover, and John suggested that we talk about the problem with problem-based business requirements, which was really fun because we had a session just a little while back, and I'll throw the link in the notes and the chat in a little while, with Steve Johnson talking about maybe we should be problem managers and really focusing on the problem-based business requirements. So I think having two different perspectives on how to think about problem-based business requirements and value-based business requirements is going to be a really enriching conversation. So I'm pleased to welcome John Mansour, who is the managing partner of Proficience, back to Product Coffee with us here today. John, good to see you. Welcome back, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here and great to see lots of familiar faces from my, as I refer to you, my Atlanta product management family here. Regarding the topic here, we're going to talk about business requirements. Okay, so for those of you, if you've been in product management for more than a day, your directive is go find the biggest customer problems you can find, and let's figure out how to solve them, because that's where the value is, right? And so that is a true statement. But the point of today's discussion is really more of a self-awareness in terms of how we gather and document business requirements, right? So the point is, if it is only a problem, the odds of missing the value mark go way up. And so what I'm going to walk through today are a couple of real world examples, and I have three of them. I could, I have hundreds of these, but I'm going to give you three of them today and contrast a problem-based business requirement with one that has more of an outcome base to it, okay? And you'll see the difference there. So again, like I said, it's one of those things that we all have to think about as we gather business requirements, right? So it doesn't matter which role you're in, if you're in a product management role, a product marketing role, a sales role, a customer service role, a customer success role. Anytime you're having a customer conversation, you're gathering some form of business requirements. Okay, so that's really the essence of today. And even, like I struggle with this myself sometime, because I'll be writing a blog or I'll be putting together some training materials, and I'll look at like, okay, the objective of this lesson or the point of this blog, and then I'll come back a day later and I'll go, nah, that's not really the point. Okay. And so when we do business requirements, we kind of have to think about it the same way, like what's the point of this requirement as it relates to the customer? Okay. So again, the point of this is, if we're only doing problem-based business requirements, it's a problem because we may not have full context. All right, so those of you who have known me for a while have heard me say this many, many times. As product management goes, so goes the rest of the organization. And as it relates to business requirements, right, the dialogue, the narrative, whatever you want to call it, the value narrative, starts with us as product managers, right? So when we gather business requirements before we even build something, think of those business requirements as we're writing the customer success story before we build the product, right? So the only thing we've got to fill in then is customer names. So think about your business requirements like that. Have you written a customer success story? Does the context of your business requirement constitute a customer success story in terms of what we're doing, why we're doing it, who's it going to help, why is that important, all those things there. And if we do that and we do it well, then think about what happens in engineering, marketing, sales, and on out to the rest of the organization, right? We have created a picture perfect, crystal clear value target, meaning we know what we're building, we know why we're building it, we know what it's going to help customers do, we know why it's important to them, we know why they can't get there. And then our product becomes a solution, right? So if I were to use a GPS analogy here, think of your business requirements as the destination and the turn-by-turn directions, and your products are the vehicle to get you there, right? So think about it that way. Okay, so example number one. So this is real life. This is, again, real world example from one of my customers who one of their target markets was skilled nursing facilities, otherwise known as nursing homes. So what you see here is what I would call a typical business requirement, right? The admission process is manual, it's paper-based and error-prone. Okay, so we see a lot of business requirements like this, right? So when we see a business requirement like this, right, if something's manual, paper-based, the first thing, well, let's automate it, right? Boom, let's automate the admission process, problem solved. Not so fast, okay? So this is where we need to think about outcomes. So with this particular client, I said, you know, and this is, so here's the more interesting thing. As product managers, most of you know this, but it's a matter of, like I said, the self-awareness of really putting the full context around this. So I start poking the bear with the product managers. We're in the training class. And I'm like, well, okay, just because we automate it doesn't mean we're going to solve a problem, right? Why is the admission process so important? Why do they want to even focus on the admission process? So here's what we came up with, right? We need to change it to make it less stressful for the patient and their family. That's outcome number one. The second thing we need to do is we need our care staff to spend more time with patients and less time on admissions, right? So for those of you who know the healthcare industry, especially nursing homes, people who work there as caregivers do it because they have a passion for it. They don't make any money. You can make more money as a barista at Starbucks than you can working as a caregiver in a nursing home, unless you're, you know, a nurse or a clinical professional, doctor, whatever, right? So when people go to work in nursing homes and they spend all this time doing all this paperwork and stuff like that, it's like, well, you know, I can do this anywhere, right? You get burnout, right? So we want our caregivers to spend more time with patients, not doing administrative paperwork. Third outcome is we need all of the forms and things people fill out to be completed so that they become legally binding agreements and meet compliance requirements. Okay, so nursing homes get sued a lot, number one. And number two, there are enormous compliance requirements, right? So in a lot of cases, this manual paper-based process, forms don't get completed, they don't get signed, so on and so forth, right? So leaving them wide open. So think about these outcomes here, right? And then you think about, well, it's, you know, manual and paper-based, so let's just automate it. So if we just took automation at that level, and I'm not saying you would, we would probably whiff on the first two of these things. The third thing we would probably get because we could require fields and make sure things were completed according to however they have to be completed. Okay, so my point here is if we understand the outcomes, then the customer's biggest problems will literally hit us right between the eyes, because now all we have to do is say, well, what's stopping you from getting those outcomes? And why do those obstacles occur? And then we have complete context, right? So if you were to put this into, I don't know, roadmap context, right? And someone said, well, you know, what's on our roadmap for the next quarter, right? It would go something like this. One of the things that we need to help nursing homes do is create a less stressful experience for the patient and their family when they're being admitted to the nursing home. One of the biggest stressors is X, Y, and Z. Here's why that happens. Here's how long it takes, and so on and so forth. Here's how we're going to alleviate those stressors to get the outcome. Okay. Now, without describing any features, all of you have complete context on what we're doing and why and what the issues are and what the value is, right? So if I give business requirements like that to my development teams, to my marketing and sales teams, to my customer success teams, right? Let's jump all the way to the customer success or customer onboarding process, right? If we're going to onboard a customer with this new functionality, we're going to start with the outcome. We're going to make it less stressful for the patient and their family. Here are where the stressors occur. Here's how we eliminate them. Let's configure the product to eliminate the stressors. Okay, we are implementing outcomes as opposed to teaching them how to use features. Okay, example number one. Here's another one. Okay, commercial banking. So again, real life example, one of my customers, one of their markets is commercial banking. The business requirement said data exists in multiple disparate systems. Okay, now, again, for all of us in the technology space, that sounds like a problem. So at face value, we say, well, let's just create a centralized data repository. Easy enough, right? But again, we don't have context. So we could create that repository. We're probably going to do it. Just like in the last scenario, we are probably going to automate the admission process, but it's a matter of doing something with precision to get an outcome. So just because we create a centralized data repository doesn't mean we're going to get the outcome, because right now we don't know what it is. Okay, so again, what is it they want to accomplish? The first thing is we want to process loan applications faster to be more competitive, right? Because everyone's like how fast you can do something. Second outcome is we want to improve the customer experience during the application process. So right now there's a lot of back and forth. The bank asks you for this, you give them that, they ask you for something else. You're like, I already gave that to somebody else in some other part of the bank. Oh, I didn't know that, right? It's you know, not a great experience. Third outcome, reduce the number of high-risk loans, okay? So when you don't have complete information on your customers, you may be taking on loans that are higher risk than you want to take on, right? Which makes your portfolio a little bit riskier, okay? So again, if we understand those outcomes, then we have to look at what are the obstacles or problems in that application process that prevent those outcomes and why do they occur? Then we can think about how our product will address those, okay? So again, instead of just saying, well, let's just, let's create a centralized data repository. In fact, when I was a product manager many years ago, we created a centralized data repository to do something, but the way they created the data repository, we couldn't get the data or use it how we wanted to. It was absolutely useless, okay? And we heard it from customers. It wasn't pretty. Last example, hotel chains. So this was I was talking to a chief marketing officer, and they had, they were going to launch something, big success story, and I think it was Marriott they were talking about. And he said, their big problem or their strategic goal was to make IT more scalable. I'm thinking to myself, well, that doesn't really sound that strategic, but there's probably a why behind that, right? But again, if it's, IT is not scalable, well, okay, let's add XYZ features to make IT more scalable. And again, you're going to do this with a little bit more precision. But again, if we don't understand the outcome, we may whiff on the scalability issue, or we may miss the mark, right, to get the outcome. So we go back and say, okay, well, why is it that IT needs to be more scalable? Well, as it turned out, a greater percent of their growth was going to come via acquisition, number one. Okay, so we're going to be scaling up, maybe scaling down, whatever. We need to reduce the time, effort, cost of integrating or consolidating these new acquisitions. And number three, we don't want any disruption to customers. And I can remember, so I'm a Marriott junkie, have been for years. And when they acquired, I think it was Starwood several years ago, talk about disruption to customers, right? They had to give me I don't know, a new Marriott rewards number 3 different times. And I had to go and sign in and do this, and they were going to combine everything, but then they didn't. And I had to do it again, right? So there was a lot of disruption to customers. Again, same dialogue, right? So scalability, what are the obstacles to the scalability when we acquire a new company? Why do they occur, right? So then we get complete context. And so, like I said when I started, right, this is more of a self-awareness. When we look at our business requirements, is it just a problem that we're addressing, or are we addressing a problem to get some very specific outcomes? Okay, so if it's a problem-only requirement, our odds of missing the mark go up because we may or may not be solving a problem to get the outcome. So here's the moral of the story. You can solve customer problems and still miss the target for measurable value. And this is a B2B thing, right? Because a lot of cases we focus on user problems. And so solving user problems is good, but the point of our products is to make people in certain roles better at their job, but make them better at that job in ways that have value to the company, okay? So if we're in a consumer product world, the consumer is the buyer, is the user, we make consumers happy, we're good. In B2B, we got to make our users happy, but we also have to improve their performance at whatever they do in a way that has value to the organization all the way up the food chain. So we can, if we're just solving problems, what a lot of companies end up with is bloated, feature-rich products instead of business solutions, and they don't help customers get outcomes. They don't eliminate obstacles to get customers outcomes that are really important and or strategic to their business, okay? And when that happens, your value to the customer goes down, okay? A lot of you have been in product management for years. You've seen this, you've lived it, right? We have a lot of features in our product, but when it comes down to what customers actually want to do with it, the features don't quite fit to help me get the outcome, or we don't make it easy to get the outcome. So if you want to think about, when people say a solution, think of a business solution as an outcome. It's pretty simple. Here's an outcome. Here's why you can't get there. Here's why it's important. The solution is the product, okay? So it can be pretty simple. All right, so here's why I raised this, okay? This product management stuff we do is hard. Even when it's easy, it's hard, right? There's a lot to it. There's so many things we have to account for to do. We got so many bases to cover, right? So think of this as a way to just simplify everything. Start with the end in mind, and the customer's biggest problems will pretty much hit you right between the eyes if you just say, well, why can't you get there? Why is that important? It's that why question, okay? And so whether you're in product management and you're gathering business requirements to figure out what to build, or if you're in product marketing or in a sales role, business requirements are helping you do a better job of position marketing and selling what you have. It's the same technique to gather business requirements. And, it's just ask the right questions. So Ode, when you were talking about getting into product management, I 100% agree with you. So one of the best product managers that I ever hired, I hired her with no domain expertise whatsoever. But the reason I hired her is she knew the right questions to ask. And over time, she developed enough domain expertise, but her role as a product manager, right? She was literally the business person driving the product. She knew the right questions to ask, the right people to talk to, and how to facilitate that process to bring good solutions to market. But she was a rare commodity. But if you do know the right questions to ask, that can make up a lot for not having domain expertise. Okay. In fact, you can get along without any domain expertise if you know the right questions to ask. Having domain expertise obviously will make it easier to get there, but you can do it. It's rare though. So I'll end here with a little bit about proficiency, and then we can have a discussion around this because there are lots of different perspectives that we've all come from, and I'd love to hear from some of you. So Proficiency is a training company. We train product managers, product marketing managers, and product demo people. And what is unique about how we train people is we don't do public courses. It's either on demand or virtual classroom or live classroom. So we personalize it to your products and your markets. So when you come out of the training, you know what good looks like for you, okay? And the second thing is what we've been talking about today. Our framework and all of our best practices are centered on customer outcomes first, problems next, okay? So you got the outcome and the problem there. You get both parts of the equation. And then the last thing, which I alluded to a little bit earlier in my example, is our B2B specialization, right? So again, we build products for users, and users have to love our products, but we have to build products with the intent of making users better at their jobs in ways that have value to that organization where the users work, okay? So it's not just about making users happy, it's about creating value for the organization through the users and making them better at whatever it is they do. So I'll stop there and leave us plenty of time for discussion. Jason, back to you.
I want to, now we're off mute. I want to actually just take a quick moment to talk about your own value statement, John, and that B2B specialization. One of the things that we hear over and over again in our marketing courses in university is the importance of focus and defining your niche and knowing who your customer is. And I think you're the only product management training and consulting organization that I deal with on a regular basis that actually has that level of focus. Say we do B2B, and that is an actual proof point on, and your success is a proof point on that fundamental strategy and key piece of strategy. So I just want to call that out to everybody here on the call. It's not so much anything you don't know, but I just want to point it out to everybody else.
Thank you.
Yep. So let's take a moment and dig in and get into some discussion here. We got plenty of time here, and John, I'll leave the floor with you to kind of guide the discussion from here.
Okay. Feel free to raise your hand, your visual hand there in the console, and then we can have a discussion. If you have questions or comments, go for it.
Can I just go ahead? Nobody's.
Yep. Go for it.
Okay. Like I always try to tell the team is problem definition is the major part of our job, right? Sometimes we don't even understand what the problem is exactly. We just jump into finding a solution. I always say, if you don't know what the problem is, how are you trying to give me like 10,000 solutions for it? So I always like go back to the basics of understanding the problem correctly here, right? Time in and time again, I have seen places where they have template for customer questions. Oh, you go interview the customer as the same person, even though it doesn't fit the client at all.
Mm-hmm.
The way you ask questions, right, is the key of actually finding out information from the client. Most of our clients are only talking about the problem that they face, right? Like, oh, okay, I am doing this, so I'm having problem with it, without being able to tell us what is the bigger picture they are looking for. So it is up to us to find more. Like, even if they talk out of topic, right? I want to listen. I like client who talk a lot to me.
Yes.
If they are not talkative, I make them talk. Like I keep asking them, digging them questions and questions and questions, because if you don't ask them, if the first statement they give you something and you go back and fix it, there is a subset of a problem that comes from that fix, because you did not go to the second level, or you did not go to the root of the problem. So sometimes we try to go to the root of the problem, try to find out what the actual problem is, and I actually send back what we understood, right? Like what we as a team understood from that problem. We try to validate that we indeed captured the right problem there. So we make sure the client also knows that we understood the problem very well as they are. Sometimes we also go with them saying, okay, this is not the root of the problem. Do you think this is your problem that is causing all these other grievances? And they finally say yes. So what I try to do also is talk to other product managers, also try to show what are the questions that we have for the customer, and not pigeonhole ourselves into just one solution. So we share with each other within the company saying, hey, this is the client I'm going with. So they have these set of problems, but I'm picturing my questions to be this way. So do you have any other recommendations? So that helps us not just think that, oh, I'm doing everything right. Just ask internally that everybody is in agreement. Like I talk to my customer success manager before going to the interview saying, hey, these are all the questions I'm thinking of asking. Do you think I'm missing anything? Or I let them add the flavor to it, because they are a lot more closer to the clients than sometimes the product managers are. So
yeah, and you hit the nail on the head. I call it the 2 ears and 1 mouth rule when you're talking to customers, right? Listen at least twice as much as you talk, and get them to talk, and keep asking the why question. Like little kids, when they go, mommy, daddy, and they ask you a question, you give them an answer, and they keep asking why till you give them an answer they deem satisfactory, right? Do the same thing with customers. So quick story here as it relates to sales. So when we had the COVID shutdown 2 years ago, one of my clients whose product was actually like the COVID shutdown spiked the demand for his product. So the guy who was the VP of sales is one of my old cronies from years ago. He calls me up, he goes, hey, John, I just lost my pre-sales person. Can you pinch hit for me for a while? I'm like, sure, because nobody was doing training then. So for a few months there, I was back in demo mode, right? So before I became a product manager, I was a pre-sales consultant, then went into product management, right? So I'm doing literally 3, 4, 5 discovery calls and or demos a day with salespeople, right? So those of you who work with sales will appreciate this, right? So we're going to do a discovery call, and I'm the pre-sales guy, and I've got a salesperson on the call with me. And so they open up the conversation, right? And so the minute salespeople would hear a customer problem, they would immediately jump in and talk about, we can solve that. right? So I do this for about a week because I want to get a feel for all the salespeople. There are about a half a dozen salespeople. I'm supporting all of them, right? So we've gone for about a week, and I'm watching this pattern of behavior. Like as soon as they hear a customer problem, it's like, oh, we could solve that. And so finally I said, all right, team, huddle up on our Friday call. I'm like, time out. When a customer talks about a problem they have, your only question is why. Tell me why you have that problem. How does it occur? Why does it occur? Before you start talking about the product. Otherwise, you're in ready, fire, aim mode. And they would go off on these long-winded diatribes explaining how the product works and, oh, it's flexible and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, we got to stop that, right? But it's the same thing in sales, right? In a lot of cases, when we're product managers, right? If I have a scalability solution, I call them leading the witness questions, right? We want to talk about scalability instead of just tell me what's on your A list and why it's important to this part of your business, and we'll figure out if it's a scalability issue or not at the end of the discussion.
I'm just enjoying this so much because I just came off a call yesterday with a client like that saying, don't ask those questions. Don't promise them anything. Yeah.
I had a situation several years ago when I was at a previous company where I was getting a lot of requests from the sales team to take me out to do roadmap dog and pony shows. And I'm going to get to you in just a second, Jerry, as well. But I was never really getting my intent in agreeing to do those roadmap presentations was to also get a good deep customer interview on the back of the sales call. And I was not having a whole lot of luck. I finally told one of our client success managers who was taking me out, or we were calling them relationship managers at the time, who was taking me out. I said, okay, so here's the deal. I'll do the roadmap presentation, but for the first half hour of our meeting, you're not allowed to say anything. And I'm not going to talk about the roadmap. You may not say anything. All you can do is take notes. And she looked at me. It was a really important client, so she went with it. And I was able to actually dig in and do the 5 whys and go deeper and deeper into their problem space before we even talked about the roadmap. And then I was able to show them how the roadmap that we had, what we had in development, was actually going to impact them and help them with their challenges. But I was also able to do some deeper discovery. And at the same time, she knew about products that weren't in my portfolio that I didn't know as much about. And she was able to actually understand how through our services offerings we could help them in some other ways as well. And we walked out of that meeting with my sales colleague having a whole list of things that she could go and sell. And at the same time, me actually having the deep customer research that I was trying to get to at the moment. And she then went back to the rest of the organization and said, take Jason on your sales calls, and when he tells you to shut up, shut up.
Yeah, and the difference between the sales function and product management, right? We are gathering business requirements from whole lots of customers and prospects and collating to some common denominators to go after a market, right? When you're in a sales role, it's on a customer by customer basis and you're selling what you have, right? But the technique for gathering those business requirements is absolutely no different, zero zilch. It is the same technique. You got to ask the same questions. It's how you use them. You use them differently in a sales role than you would in a product management role. Jerry,
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Yep.
Thanks. My question goes along the lines of when you're in front of these customers, and I'm going to use your automation example. I'm going to play that one back because that recently hit close to home for me. Besides asking why, what other techniques do you have to get to those true outcomes they're looking for? And I'm asking that because in my situation, I continue to ask, why do we need to improve the problem that they had stated? And they're like, we just need to automate it. And I'm like, okay, automation's a solution. Why do you need it? Well, we just need to automate it. And it took me probably a good week before they finally understood what I was trying to get to.
Yeah.
And I say a good week. I wasn't with them 8 hours a day for 5 days. It was like an hour here, a half hour there, things like that. But what other interview techniques have you used to get around to the outcomes?
Yes, and it is, you're dead on. Sometimes customers are we just want to automate. We just want to do this, right? And they're talking about features of a product. So my go-to question to get them off of, we just need to automate. Okay, great. We're going to automate it. Tell me what changes after the automation. Tell me what change. We're going to automate. Great. It's going to be perfect. Tell me what changes after the automation. What can you measure? What's going to be better after the automation? Then you get them on the topic of, we'll be able to do more of this, or we'll spend less of this. We'll do that. And then you can get to tell me why that's important.
Okay. That makes sense. What's the success? How will we know we've been successful with the automation?
Yeah, define the success of the automation. Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
And you know, as you go through this questioning, so again, this is a B2B specific thing. So it doesn't matter whether you go bottom up or you go top down, and it depends on how the conversation starts in terms of how I approach the dialogue, right? So if I'm talking with people who are doing the work down in the trenches, I'm going to do bottom up. Tell me what job task you're doing. You know, tell me why, what's the ultimate outcome you want? Why is that important? Tell me why you can't get there. And then I start going up, well, why is that important to this department that you work in? What's the department being asked to do that's strategic to the company? And I go all the way up, right? If I'm talking to senior executives, it's like, what's going on in the company strategically and what's on your A list and why, right? And then we go top down, right? So either way, we're going to get to it. But when someone starts with, we just need the, right? One of these customers, of mine was like, you know, our number one priority this year is to implement your software. Why? We just need to implement the software, right? So I got back to, okay, we're implemented. Now, what does success look like? Then we got to the business discussion.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Mark.
Yeah, so John, I have two questions. One kind of follows up on Jerry's comment. So right now I'm launching a product that's a little bit on the cutting edge in an industry to a group of users that have been doing kind of the same thing the same way for 20, 30 years. And they tend to want to look for a different solution for the same problem. But I should say the same solution to the same problem, just packaged differently.
Yeah.
So my first question is, when you're talking to a group of people that don't kind of understand what the potential is to have a better outcome and what that outcome could be, how do you phrase those questions? The second question to that would be, I'm also running into a sales team that's giving me well, we only get, you know, a couple of meetings with the clients and the prospects, so we don't have time to do this deep discovery that you want to do. So they want to go right into it, and they won't give me the time. I'm also the de facto sales engineer as well right now.
Yeah. So here's the quick route to doing deep discovery without doing deep discovery, and it doesn't even need to be that deep. And I'll go back to when I'm pinch hitting as a pre-sales rep, right? So like after 40 or 50 discovery calls, I started like three things came up in every call. So the way I would start the discovery call, especially because salespeople, you know, and the prospects, oh, we just want to see the demo, right? So I would start the demo with, there are the three top reasons people buy this product are X, Y, and Z. I'd start there and I just lay them out on the table. And then I would let them agree or disagree with me. And either way, we got to the real why they were buying, okay, right up front. And so again, it doesn't matter whether you put something out there that's right or wrong, just make a statement, put some stakes in the ground, say the ultimate outcome that customers want when they buy this product is X, and give them a business outcome, right? It's to be more competitive here. It's to create a better customer experience. It's to be more efficient here. It's to save money there. That's why people buy this product. Talk to me about, you know, why you're gonna spend money from us or somebody else to buy this. You'll get to it pretty quickly. And it's okay, here are the most common reasons people can't get there. I'll throw those out on the table. The problems, agree or disagree with me, then let's talk product. It's pretty simple. And this is, you know, this is the part of product management. This is like our thought leadership, right? Because if we're out there spending more time talking to prospects and customers than everybody else, and I really think we should be, it's hard to do, but we should be doing that, right? We should be more well-versed on all those things than everybody else is, right? So when I was a product manager, it was procurement and settlement products. I prided myself on knowing the dynamics and what was going on in the industry and best practices and all that. So when I would get in a conversation with a prospect or a customer, I'd just throw out, here's what's going on in the world right now. Tell me where you are relative to that. And we got to the outcomes and the problems pretty quick. And then we would have a very good discussion about whatever product stuff we wanted to talk about. and it was always on point.
Yeah. Great. Thank you.
I think one of the distinctions to make here that you're not saying, John, and that's where a bit of the controversy can come in, is there's a good maxim specifically that states fall in love with the problem, not the solution. And I think that is an important distinction when you get into the development cycle, you get into the requirements cycle, and you could also easily rephrase that and say fall in love with the outcome, not the solution. The problem is so often we get feature focused on delivering the thing that is on the roadmap, and we lose sight of why the thing is the roadmap in the first place. Can you maybe talk for a moment about some product managers that you've known, some situations that you've encountered where you saw some master strokes at keeping the eye on the outcome rather than the feature itself that's intended to deliver the outcome, and how we can avoid letting our companies go off course and get focused on the wrong thing once we've made a commitment to an investment?
Mm-hmm. And what I want everyone to take away from here is the business requirement. It's a two component. To get the value context, you need the outcome and the problem and or obstacles, right? And then the why behind both of those. So it's not just a problem, it's not just an outcome. You got to have both of those things and the whys behind each one of those. That is then you have complete context around a business requirement. Okay. So back to the feature discussion, your question there, Jason. And this, you guys deal with this every day. People submit product enhancements. We need this feature. Okay. And again, I see this with my clients, right? So one of my clients who had, a sort of a sales execution platform that, hung off the backbone of Salesforce, right? So one of their customers was like, hey, we need to, in our opportunity list, we need to put a probability score in there in terms of the probability to help, the salesperson's estimation of the close probability of a deal. And it's like, well, okay, I could add that feature, just add a column, put a close probability in there and problem solved. But again, problem not solved. So one of the more senior salespeople is like, just calls the customer out. And sometimes you just got to be bold. He goes, you mean to tell me you're going to let your happy ear salespeople put a close probability score in their own pipeline? Come on. Salespeople think they're going to close everything. He said, let's talk about what you're really doing, right? And got back to the business dialogue. Well, it's like, so we get into the business dialogue and the chief revenue officer goes, I want to make sure our salespeople are working on the most winnable deals. And right now we don't know what those are. Well, that's a very different problem than we want to put a close probability score in there so we get better at forecasting. And so, and I've seen good salespeople do this with prospects too, is like in a very polite way, they literally call bullshit on some product requirement because it's like, that won't go anywhere close to what you're trying to do. I know what you're trying to do. And so that's, and if you do that right, again, you're not going to be controversial or do it in a conflictual tone, but it will improve your credibility to go, that ain't going to work. And I'm going to tell you why that's not going to work, right? And you give some good examples. Those are the master strokes I've seen. Jerry.
Hey guys, a lot of the last few minutes has had a feel of being tied to the sales process, but that seems like a high wire act at best. John, can you talk to having that customer insight process apart from the sales process so that you can have, this community has its own conversation with its client base where it can focus on outcomes rather than being part of a sales process?
Yeah, a good question. So as product managers, here's the hardest thing for us to do because we live, eat, breathe, and sleep with our products 24/7. We are encumbered by our product knowledge. So when we have customer meetings, we often get, before we even realize that we get into these how the product should work discussions before we understand what it is we're trying to accomplish, why it's important, and why we can't get there. Okay. And so if we don't have answers to those three questions, any discussion about the product is ill-advised or ill-directed at that point, because it's going to go nowhere. Okay. And so again, sometimes your customers want to talk product, and the way to get them back to the business discussion, like we talked earlier, is, okay, tell me what success looks like after we do this to the product, and then you can get back to the business discussion. And so it's the same technique, whether I'm a product manager talking to a customer or a salesperson talking to a prospect. If we don't understand what the end game is, what the customer wants to accomplish, what the outcome is, why that outcome is important, and what's stopping them, the product discussions become a moot point. And that is one of the hardest things for us product managers to do, because products are what we do. And so we just, before we even know it, we're having a product discussion. And so that's why I said at the beginning of this session, this is more of a self-awareness for us to, when we have conversations, regardless of who they're with, and we're talking about any sort of need or requirement, in one way, shape, or form, before we get into a product discussion, we got to understand what you're trying to accomplish, why it's important, and why you can't get there.
So thanks for that. Just a quick follow-up. How much of your thinking on this varies based on who's on the other side of the table? Because oftentimes in a B2B situation, there's a buying agent that you're meeting with, not the actual end user community. Mm-hmm. And they may know nothing about what's valuable to that company other than a sheet of requirements that somebody wrote up and they were told to go out and buy one of these.
Yes. So again, I think and this is where, whether again, you are a product manager dealing with a customer, or you're a salesperson dealing with a project manager or someone who's been tasked to go find a product. And what I have found is when you get project managers in either case who don't know the business answers to the questions other than someone told me to go find one of these systems, then I think your answer to that is, we have one of those systems and so do 100 other people out there. But in order to make sure that we are going to deliver value to you, we have to know what you're trying to do and why, and what the outcomes are you're looking for. Otherwise, any of these things will do. Just, go find the cheapest one and buy it. And then,
so does that speak to making sure the right people are in the room when the meetings are the invites are being sent? Okay, great. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, you took the words right out of my mouth, because then they are forced to get the right people in the room, and it gets you out of just dealing with the frontline screening person who's the gatekeeper.
Yeah, takes a strong customer facing team to have that level of insistence, though, doesn't it?
Yeah. And it's, you may have to end up giving them some sort of an obligatory, the sort of generic demo. But again, whenever I had to, and even when it was with customers, existing customers, right? You want to show them a new product or something like that, and you don't have the right people in the room. My dialogue was, here's the ultimate outcome people want. Here are a couple of reasons they can't get there. And I take you through a couple of scenarios and I give you the 15-minute demo. It's like, okay, if you like what you see here, let's get the people in the room who do this stuff every day and have a real conversation about
it. That's a good way to pivot the conversation. Excellent.
And that goes to your credibility too, because you're standing there telling people what it is they need to do and why it's important. And chances are, if you know the space well enough, they're going to agree with you and go, yeah, that's pretty much what we're trying to do.
You're also showing that you care about them.
Yeah. Exactly.
Thank you.
Cortland.
This kind of goes along to my question of identifying pockets of value, either in, we mentioned the buying community may have a value piece out of your product or your features, as well as the user community, as well as the supervisor community, as well as the legal community. What methods or techniques do you think find useful for gathering all the different slight variations in value that are derived from your product? Do you understand the question? See where I'm?
Yes, I
headed?
do. And I think this goes to the, and this is always my preference because it's easier, number one, to get to the answers to your questions, right? So when I think about business requirements, my preference is always to do top-down business requirements, because if you're talking to someone in a C-level position or a senior VP, what they're going to tell you, think of that as the ultimate outcomes for the organization, right? We need to be more competitive. We're doing global expansion. We are, whatever the market dynamics are that they are reacting to as an organization, those become the big whys as I refer to them. Okay. So if you take that big why, right? So if it's, number one priority is global expansion, number one priority is increase our wallet share with existing customers because, there aren't a lot of new customers out there for whatever reason, right? You're going to get big things like that. As you talk to then the operational constituents like legal, it's like, okay, because of that strategy, what's on your A list? Sales, what's on your A list? IT, what's on your A list? Marketing, what's on your A list to support that global strategic initiative? And then, then the picture starts getting really clear. And then, here's the beauty behind this. As a product manager, when you have that kind of knowledge about what your customers are doing and you're having conversations with people internally, you'll be amazed at how much it will keep you out of the weeds of a product conversation and how some feature is going to work, as opposed to just saying, listen, if our customers are, trying to grow wallet share, and here are all the reasons they can't, and there's an issue in legal over here, and you got some issue with this over here, and they're a global company and all that. You look at all these different reasons why they can't do it. Then all of a sudden the wheels start turning about how we're going to eliminate the obstacles, not what features we're going to build. It just changes the whole conversation.
Great. Thank you.
So this has been a fantastic session, John. Thank you so much for being here. I think you set it up and shifted the perspective for a lot of folks and really led a great conversation here. So I'm really excited that you were able to do it. Thank you so much for coming back.
Thank you. Great to be here.
I would like to, since we have a couple of minutes, if you don't mind, I'd like to throw another question at you that is on a different topic, but I think it's kind of related to what we've been talking about. This is one of the pre-registration questions that came in on the session as well. And someone was asking about in the early stages of product management, or in the early stages in your early career as a product manager, how do you address or think about or explain failure in a positive light? We talk about so often, especially in a lean startup mentality, fail early, learn from your failures and move forward. But when you're thinking about the career perspective, you've worked with a lot of product managers over your career, and not everybody steps into their first role and knocks something out of the park. Sometimes we have some setbacks early on in our career. How do you think about those situations and carry a meaningful conversation about learning forward that will help propel your career forward, even in light of something that didn't go as intended?
Yeah. So, when I look at the failures product managers have early in their career, and I had a few of my own, and I would say the common denominator in all of those was that we made an assumption that things that were meaningful to a few customers represented a market. And for myself, right, I had even less of an excuse because I worked in healthcare. Then I went to work for a software company who obviously targeted healthcare doing pre-sales, right? Then I went into product management. So I had the actual practitioner experience. And so I made some assumptions early in my product manager career that some of the issues, needs, outcomes that were important to the healthcare organization I worked with and a few others that I knew represented a market, right? And it gets back to what we're talking about today. So it's like, well, I know a couple of hospitals that had this problem. They all must have this problem. Let's go solve it. And I convinced everybody and I could sell it. I sold everybody on it was a big problem and we solved it. And guess what? It was a nice to have. Right. And it was two things, right? So I made an assumption of what was a requirement of a few that represented many. That was number one. And I, again, was focused on just the problem without the outcome. And, if I would have either talked to more customers or focused on the outcome, which would have forced me to talk to more customers, it probably wouldn't have been a failure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And how would you leverage that in the conversation then going forward to demonstrate, evidence of that learning and the perspective and the value that you can create based on that experience?
So from that point on, I think the lesson I learned, and then the organization I worked for, we happened to start formalizing this, was we started formalizing our customer interactions in terms of business requirements gathering into formal sessions where we would get 12, 15, 20 customers literally into a room back then, because we didn't have Zoom meeting. We would herd them all into the compound for a couple of days and just talk about their businesses and their priorities and what they were doing. And it was, cross industry. So we had, healthcare, utilities, we had banking, we had government, we had all the different kinds of industries in there. And again, so you're listening to all these things, but then there are a whole bunch of common denominators across all of them that would represent where we should focus. And so we formalized that process from that point on. And it, it was, like I said, it was a teaching moment when you make the mistake, but it's like, don't ever do that again, right? Make sure you talk to enough customers that you have a good representation of your markets before you decide that, yeah, this is going to, just because it's great for one person, it's easy to assume, oh, who wouldn't love this? But guess what? There's a whole lot of people out there that might not love it. So my first company where I was a product manager, we formalized that business requirements gathering process with our customer advisory boards. And it was they come in, we throw the questions out and we listen. There was no, here's what we're going to do. It was all listening. My second company, when I was the head of product management, I implemented that process with our product managers who all came from the industry and thought they knew everything. And then we got customers in the room and they figured out how much they didn't know, of course. And it was all good after that.
Very good. Thank you. I wonder how many of you, we talk about sprint retrospectives and learning from the iteration. We seldom talk about product retrospectives and really kind of, I know a lot of companies, IBM specifically, I recall, has a formal process for evaluating the ongoing results of the product in a pretty public form. They rolled that out as part of their offering management practice, kind of a new view into it a few years back, and it's really effective, but it often becomes a second-class citizen to investing in new things and building that discipline of doing a retrospective, or you come from a healthcare facing background, kind of deep in your history there, John, doing kind of the M&M review that that doctors do. What went wrong and what can we learn from it is critical to building a successful product organization and product management expertise. But thanks so much again for being here. That's it for today's Product Coffee. We've got about 3 minutes left. And I'm really thrilled that you could all join. Really thrilled to have you back, John. Thank you so much. Thank you for support of Product Camp. And thank you for all the workshops that you do. Looking forward to connecting with you again in the near future.
Yes, thanks everybody for participating today. Great discussion. I hope to see all of you again soon. Have a good day.